So look forward to talking to you all.
I'm Cindy Tran. I'm out of the Department of Chemistry and Forensic Science in the College of Science, Technology, Engineering, and Mathematics. Had to get all that in. And like as Shirley said, she wished she had this when she was a new faculty, and I was a new faculty in my first or second years, and Shirley was on a panel like this. And I remember sitting there going, wow, like these people have it all together. And now I'm sitting on a panel going, yeah, we don't. So if you're feeling like, man, we have it all together, then just get to know us a little bit more and you'll fit right in. So
Hello, everybody. My name is Shirley Hughes, and so I'm a faculty member in the Department of Clinical Therapeutic Programs, which are in the College of Education and Applied Human Sciences. And so I teach courses in the Communication Sciences and Disorders program. So I'm a licensed speech language pathologist too here in Kentucky. I'm also somebody who stutters too, which is what I teach and what my research is in. So you'll probably hear me stutter during this time too. But I'm really excited to be here with all of you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Juan Gomez-Becerra, and I teach Spanish and Latinx Studies in the College of Letters and Arts and Social Sciences class. I've always called the class. So yes, I'm also the director for Centro, and it's a pleasure to be here.
So to get us started, we're going to talk about scholarship first. We should have talked about teaching. We're a teaching mission institute. Now we're going to talk about
Feel free to
teaching.
change.
Okay, thank you. We're a teaching mission institution. So let's talk a little bit about teaching. And I want us to think about time management, project management, goal setting. Anybody want to start us off about your teaching? You know, I started with the twofer ideas, but what do you think? Who wants to talk a little bit about goal setting or time management? How do you budget your time?
So in our college, kind of one of the interesting things is we were one of the first to go online. So our FTEs are out the roof. I mean, when I started, we would have 160 students in an online class with 6 or 8 facilitators. So the good thing for me is I came to EKU from industry, so I was a very systems oriented person. And a lot of you all may be as well, not only whether you came from industry or some other environment, or just how you came up through higher ed. But I found that to be very helpful because it allowed me to take a look at my classes and be like, okay, how am I going to accomplish these learning outcomes with 160 people and it be a value-added experience? So you really do kind of learn to settle into the rhythm of what's expected of you in your department and what your student body demographic is, because that impacts it. I teach in our grad program, so virtually most of our students are non-traditional. They happened upon our degree program because nobody wakes up and says, I want to be a safety manager when I grow up. So it's something that's a discovery major. So it gives us the opportunity to kind of really work with people who are discovering a new field and developing them into it because we're excited about it. You know, I mean, it's kind of geeky to talk about occupational safety. I learned long ago to keep to the high points because when you start talking to a lot of people about your area of interest, eyes glass over pretty quick. But again, when you've got 160 people in an online class and then another 25 in that same class on campus, figuring out how to adapt your teaching methodology to hit those students. And one thing I would strongly encourage is taking advantage of educational opportunities through this format because you really do get to learn a lot about college teaching. For me, coming into higher ed was a completely different job. I mean, I was a safety manager, safety director in industry. That's not college teaching. And even though I knew my subject matter, being a professor was a completely different world. So like Shirley and I were talking, we were here back in the days of Hal and Charlie when, you know, they were doing this. Rusty's took it over to a whole different level. So you guys have a lot of really cool opportunities ahead of you to take advantage of.
So my experience, I do some online teaching now, but not as much, but I've taught, I was just sitting here kind of trying to add it up, and I think I'm at 14 different courses in the last 8 years that I've been here. So I would highly encourage you not to take that many new preps, because every course is different, and even if you're changing from an in-person to a online modality, or your e-campus versus a non-e-campus 16-week, like how you teach every class is going to be slightly different because the needs of the students are different, the material is different, the presentation and approach can be different. And so really kind of, if I could talk to myself back in year 1 and 2 to really sit down with my chair and be like, what are the classes that I need to show my excellence in? What is the repetition that I'm going to get? And how can we kind of let me focus on the courses that are really within my area of expertise, and allow me to repeat and be excellent in those, as opposed to being like, well, you have some expertise over here, so you can fill this hole or fill that hole for these kind of one-time courses. So, I would say don't be afraid to challenge your courses if you feel like you're being constantly asked for new courses. And then the other thing in terms of time management, because I teach a lot of different courses. I've started in recent years kind of breaking down my week, saying, okay, 15 contact hours is a standard load. That's across our 5 days of work. So it's 8 hours per class per week, right? By 5 classes. Well, one of those classes is actually your service and your research, because according to our job description, that's 20% of our job, right? So 1 day a week, I'm there. But what about, if I have 8 hours to spend on this class and I'm in the class for 3 hours, now I'm down to 5 hours to work on this class. That's my prep, that's my grading, that's my answering my student emails. And so kind of aligning what I'm planning for my classes so that it'll kind of fit into, on average, those hours each week. And some weeks I might have an exam to grade and it's going to take more, which means other weeks I need to have nothing due for that class because I don't actually have time over the average of the semester to grade it. So that's one thing that I've been kind of toying with. And then when you have 70 people in a class, you start breaking down, I have 3 hours to grade a homework assignment and 70 people, I get 2 minutes per person. If I can't grade it in 2 minutes, that's not the assignment I can give that week if that's all the time I'm going to have to grade. And so kind of approaching that, my first year, I spent way too much time grading for the hours that I had. So kind of taking a step back and saying, what is actually a reasonable expectation of myself to manage the classes that I have? So that's my thoughts.
That was great. Yeah, with time management, I'm looking at this here. Everything that I'm going to say to all of you right now, I think one of the things is it comes from kind of who I am. And this is like a big preface. I would really encourage you all are the experts on yourself, like what's going to work for you and your identity, right, as a person. So I know that Parker Palmer talks a lot about this idea about your inner life and who you are. So everything I'm about to say about teaching, scholarship, service, it's all related to who I am and what works for me. So for me, I know for time management, so I worked as a speech language pathologist prior to going back to working in academics. So I've been in academics for about 13 and a half years now. And I kind of have that mindset of being an SLP with having to write up SOAP notes and clinical notes, and this needs to get done right now. And so a lot of times I kind of carry that with me in terms of what I'm doing. Whereas after a class, if there's a quiz, an assignment or something, I typically will grade it right away. Now that just works for me, talking about getting things done, how to get things started. I know myself, I know that I can get distracted. This is just me. Some here with that. I get so focused on things so much that I kind of forget about other things. So I know that about myself, and I know that I need to get things done right away. Because if I don't, it just gets put off. But my teaching that I do is primarily in person also. I'm also a clinical supervisor. We have an on-campus speech clinic here, speech and language clinic. And so a lot of my clinical teaching is in that form too. So that's a little bit different also. But yeah, I would just encourage you, right, just to know that there's going to be some weeks where you're going to spend a lot of time with teaching, other weeks where it's not so much. For in-person classes, sometimes I'll give tests, I'll give paper copy tests to students. And right, I'm not in front of them instructing, but I'm doing more grading that time too. So it's always going to vary. So yeah, I'll stop and I'll hand it over here.
Yeah, so I think that's just echoing what has been said is that teaching excellence, not just at EKU, I think in general, it's contextual, right? It is rooted on your practices, but it also depends highly on your program dynamic. And I think it's important to understand in a program, especially thinking PMT, right? It's important to understand that there's expectations for the program, right? And having a culture that would allow you to not have too many preparations, right? To have that communication, to communicate with your chair, communicate with your colleagues, right? So setting that culture, if that's not a culture within your program, knowing that, you're participating in the program now, and it's part of your contributions to the program could be to creating a culture that, rotates some responsibilities around. And I think, my program that has been very helpful. There's been times where I've only had 2 preparations. And usually, we talked is like, if I have PMT responsibilities, or whenever I had the PMT responsibilities in the fall mainly that turn in the reports, then I would have only 2 preparations. Right. So I think just having those conversations with your colleagues is essential. And then another thing for me, it's I don't take grading, and this, I like to be transparent. I don't take grading too serious. I think for me, student performance goes beyond receiving a grade in an assignment. So there's assignments that I look very careful into with detailed feedback, but there's other assignments, that I consider completion as, a passing or done deal, and I think I communicate that with students. It also helps me to be transparent with students. I try to have a empathetic pedagogy, but that also goes with, there's times that, I'm not having the best week and I didn't get time to prepare my class. It's okay. So, so I think it's part of managing our lives, competing expectations, in our lives at, within the program, within the institution. Yeah.
Yeah, you could say.
Sorry, something came to mind. Something Cindy said, and also something to follow up on some of the comments. One thing came to mind is to come to peace with what you're not. Because when I first started here, I would print out assignments, I would give granular feedback on sentence structure, grammar, all this kind of stuff. But I teach occupational safety. But I felt like, because I'm a teacher now, that's my job. And it took me a long time to come to terms with the fact that I am not an English teacher. And so, I don't know if I'm gonna get in trouble for saying this.
You are called English.
Yeah, I know. It's like, I kind of look at my writing like people that are musicians that say they learn to play but can't read music. It's like, I know what sounds good, but I don't know why. So I could give feedback, but at the end of the day, I'm like, I don't know that I'm really doing these students a lot of service. So finally, I transitioned to, and to get to Cindy's comment about time grading, that way sped up my grading, because then what I did is, instead of giving all this granular edits and stuff, I just basically said, you need to look at your grammar. You need to look at APA formatting, and left it at that. And then they could pursue resources in EKU to kind of shore up on that stuff.
So you've heard from our panel, you could see the importance of having a calendar. And that's what I would like to leave you with, was we're talking about teaching. Keeping your online calendar. I know some people still keep a real calendar. I don't anymore because it's all on my phone. I walk around with my phone. I got to check. My husband's like, okay, how bad is this week? What nights do we have to order out? He's picked up on that after teaching for how many years here. And I wish he would have done that when my kids were young. But, you know, he really has come around, so I could sit there on Sunday night and go, oh, yeah, I gotta be in on Friday, I'm gonna take out on my way home. You know, so he knows what I'm going to be doing, so keeping a calendar like that is helpful. It's also helpful to go ahead and put in, you know, just not your teaching time. I know we often have calendars on our doors, but really doing what Cindy said, think about when's my grading time, and I've learned, because I'm teaching predominantly online right now, that my grading time, if I don't put it in, people schedule meetings. And then all of a sudden, I'm chopped up and I can't do it. But when I think about grading, I am a video grader. I love video grading because it saves me. I could get it done in 2.78 minutes or so. I know how to get it to a point where, oh yeah, like what Scotty said about granular feedback. You need to look at your APA. You need to look at your sentence structure. If you need help with that, the Noel Studio, you know, is a good place to go. I could get you resources. Enough said, I'm done with it. Or, you know, because I teach a lot of graduate work, you know, plagiarism is a big thing, or synthesizing things. I'm big. Okay, I don't want a citation after every sentence in the paragraph, please. I know you don't want to go ahead and plagiarize, but you need to put this in your own words. So I work at that, and I think that really does help. Now, nobody talked about our transition to Canvas, y'all. Oh, you know, is anyone else doing Canvas this fall?
I now have 11 sandboxes, so.
All right. Has anyone taught in Canvas?
Yes, I have taught in Canvas. Here's what I was sharing before, like previous experience, right? At another university, I taught in Canvas. In my experience, it's very similar to Blackboard. I mean, those are just me. I mean, there's a lot of details, right? Okay, I'm sorry. Just my experience, right? There's a lot of overlap with Canvas and Blackboard, being someone who's taught in those worlds. So I'm giving everybody hope. It's gonna be okay. It is. Oh, please, yeah.
And I think part of managing, it's important to get ahead. So for example, I know that there was an opportunity to open Canva. I've never taught in Canva before. Yeah. So I asked if I can have a course in the spring. I know it's gonna be a little bit of extra time, you know, but I'm gonna be getting ahead for the fall, so it's gonna save me time whenever I have to transition all my courses. So I think through the FCT&L, you'll find some opportunities to jump in projects ahead of time. Then just keeping an eye on them and you know, getting ahead. I think it's important. Yeah.
I too have early adopted for some Canvas, thinking ahead to my fall only classes and already have sandboxes, so I can start tweaking those while I still have Blackboard access. So if you have a ton of stuff in Blackboard, or your course runs largely in Blackboard, you might want to think about early adopting. But I have one more comment about the calendar. So one of the approaches that I took a couple of years ago is I do a paper-based to-do list, but I do a semester-long to-do list, page by page, week by week. And it's got 3 columns: teaching, service, and scholarship. And I can, as I'm planning my syllabi, write on my week by week. On this week, I'm giving an exam here, which means the previous week I need to have written the exam. And on the week that I give it, I'm going to grade the exam. So if I'm layering my classes going, you know, a lot of times our exams all fall on the same week, and then all of a sudden I am drowning in grading, and it always ends up the same week that like advising starts.
Yeah.
Right? Or I know this committee is going to pick up around this time in the semester, and I can kind of pre-plan and map my whole semester, kind of take that 20,000 feet view, so that if I'm like, man, I can't have a lab report and an exam and something else to grade all on that week, I need to not give an assignment, move an assignment, do something different, because my personal bandwidth can't handle that in that week. And also the kind of column to-do list, I kind of check it all off. I use a different color today. It's pink today, pink's my color of the day. But I can kind of look then over the course of the week, because some days I get to the end of the day, I'm like, I haven't touched my classes today. Like, what am I doing as a teacher? I didn't even do anything. But then I look, and I'm like, oh, I checked all these things off in these categories in my service and my scholarship. And no, I haven't done anything teaching, but then there are days that all I do is teaching. And so it kind of gives me a whole well-rounded sense of like my week as a whole to go, am I moving all three categories forward, or am I really missing? I really didn't touch research at all this week, and I really need to put some time into that.
Can we have a
yes,
session?
sure.
Can we have a session called calendaring with Cindy?
I'll do it with me and I'll schedule one of those.
Yeah, I'm really stealing this, but I don't even know how to get started to make that work, but that sounds really amazing to keep organized and moving forward, so.
Cindy has a method.
Yeah.
Cindy does that. So calendaring with.
I don't know if
Cindy.
it fully works, but it does something.
It's transferable.
Yeah.
That's a great point. I was gonna say, I was a beta tester in spring or fall, this is fall. For Canvas. And I went in kind of kicking and screaming, but I also knew I needed to know how to guide our faculty in our online courses. So I figured if I'm gonna ask anybody else to do this, I should be the one to have to figure it out. It's not gonna be bad. It's a different organizational system. So that's what I'm having to learn about. And it really does, I think it helps student learning is what I have heard from the students I taught in the A term. I'm still double dipping a little bit with, learning to use Canvas Studio. I'm a Zoomer because I couldn't figure out how to get my screens up and I didn't have time. So I'm going to attend those sessions in November when I have more time, to teach me a little bit more about how to effectively use Canvas Studio. Because I was like flying by the seat of my pants on that one. But I can tell you can see the importance of organization, goal setting, time management, and project management in what you're teaching. And learning to negotiate with your chair, I think, is the piece that you've got to look at. First year faculty always says they're moving to second. They are like, I don't want any new classes. Well, sometimes you have to do that because somebody's got to pick up those classes. But when you get to year 3, you can start looking for the patterns. And that's what I think Cindy was talking about. So let's move to scholarship. We want to hear all about scholarship. And we're going to do the same thing. Charlie, I'm going to start with you.
Sure.
I know, as my colleague in speech language pathology, I'm an occupational therapist, we got to do this. There you go. Tell us what you're doing and how you did it and do it.
Yeah, research, right? One of the things, and I know we'll talk about this later about, what are some of the like mistakes, or I don't know what the right word is, like opportunities for growth, later. When I first started with scholarship, in my mind as a new faculty, I thought that it had to really be different. Like I had to design a whole separate study. I had to collect data separately from my teaching. I was kind of operating under this different kind of mindset about researchers. And just to be honest with everybody, I was in some ways trying to be someone that I wasn't. I can just be real. I was trying to be someone that I wasn't. And I realized, like, I love teaching and I love learning about the scholarship of teaching and learning. And so I learned to blend a lot of my research into my courses. And I realized, I'm sure we all have, we all operate on a very high level in this room. And we all have creative assignments, things that we do in class, methods that you use in your classes. And what I started to do is I said, I want to collect data on assignments that I have in my class. Like it's already set up like a research study in a way. What's the effectiveness of this? Do some kind of an intervention, right? I come from a speech language therapy world, right? Intervention, outcome. This is just me. But I started to blend my research more with my teaching. I didn't see it as separate. It's like I was already doing this work in the classroom. How to design a study or even ask, try to figure out how can I collect data on this? Something that I'm already doing. And so those are some things that I'm doing right now, or my research that I'm in is it's stuttering. And one of the projects that I did before about stuttering is areas academic and clinical training in stuttering. So how do we prepare students to support people who stutter? So a lot of things that I've done in my classes have been related to that. I don't know who wants to go. First, you want to go?
So before, I mean, I completed my PhD at ASU right before coming to EKU, and ASU was very research focused. So whenever I came here, I did not understand the expectations from the program. So that first semester was very overwhelming for me because I thought, I was gonna be, doing my research and my teaching on the side, how it was as a graduate student, So making that change was really overwhelming and realizing soon enough, a good thing that I realized, right, the dynamic, not only my program, but at EKU, right? And I think that's crucial if you want to have success in your PNT. We are a teaching institution. And I think for a lot of folks, a lot of colleagues, sometimes it might be difficult to understand that, while we're in a PhD program, or in a research program, and we moved into EKU, that infatuation with research and with being a scholar will look different, right? So learning how would that look like was a challenge for me, but luckily, I had FICTO, my colleagues, and I haven't been able to research out of choice. So I've been able to publish out of, I've asked to write chapters or things related to my field, but I have not been able to conduct a research project out of like my sole choice. I have not been able to continue my research from my PhD, right? And I've been lucky to have colleagues, from other institutions reach out. Hey, can you write a chapter on this? And, surely enough, I was like, well, yeah. But then, because to research, I feel like you need to have, some space to think, clarity of mind, to give a course in the research. And with teaching and service expectations in my program, it was very difficult. So I was not able to, and still to today, I'm not able to continue the research that I started or that I finished with my PhD. But I have been able to contribute in other ways. Colleagues from other institutions that have asked, colleagues that I have published with colleagues here through Scholarship of Teaching and Learning. So just getting creative, and as Charles said, to try to weave, that what we do as professors and as faculty in service and mentorship with some research publications. For me, in my PNT, truly has been that I wanted to make sure to at least cover the minimum scholarship requirement, right? And then from there on, for me, it's a bonus, right? So I think that's something to think about in terms of scholarship is, reading that PNT document clearly so that you know what's expected, from the document, but also learning to read the room in your program, right? Communicating again with the chair, with the colleagues, what they're truly expecting. Maybe the program is going through a transition, right? Maybe they're transitioning from into a more service-oriented program. And remember that your colleagues are the ones that are going to make the decision. So having those, maybe they haven't updated the PNT yet, right? But they're in the process. So just being aware, of the culture in your program will help you meet your scholarship expectation. And in the summers, I have found time. Of course, it's been my choice to do some other extra projects, but and it's been through the summer. I think in the summers when I have found the most time to write. I did it's the writers retreat, is it called? Do you remember? That was very helpful. I was able to finish an article. Was it 2 weeks? I don't remember. 2 days?
Yeah.
It felt like 2 weeks. It was during the pandemic. I really don't remember. It was 2020, I think. I don't remember. But I was able to finish an article, and taking advantage of opportunities like that again. It's very helpful.
I would echo a lot of what Jose once said. Before I got the writers retreat, yes, absolutely. I did one not this past May, but the one before, and wrote a grant start to finish in the 2.5 days, and I got it. So now I'm like committed to doing this research. So I was like, I'm just gonna go after this grant. I don't think I'm gonna get it, and I totally did. So
Awesome.
yeah, but I also agree that finding the time and the space to do quality research it can be very difficult, especially if that's not your favorite part of the job. For me, I actually really enjoy my teaching, and I really enjoy the service that I do. Things like this I find really fulfilling. But this does not count as research, right? Like it checks a different box. So again, coming back to your PNT policy and definitely reading the room on your PNT committee, especially if you're in a transitionary phase. So in my department, we're kind of in a transitionary phase of like whether or not we would allow scholarship of teaching and learning, because I am in a STEM field and I have a dedicated lab space and I take students to work on scientific research. Is scholarship of teaching and learning appropriate? And there was a cultural shift undergoing that went from no, it's not to yes, it is. And I was right on the cusp of that. And that became a very heated debate because what I published was scholarship of teaching and learning that came out of my innovative teaching practices. So, making sure that if your department is still in a mindset where that's not an appropriate box checking activity for your scholarship, that you are kind of playing the rules of the department and the culture of the department to know that, and you can advocate for change, because I think it should be, especially at a teaching focused institution, but to make sure that you're not going to come up to a position where they're sitting there debating whether or not to tenure you because they've told you one thing and then you decided to push the culture in a way that it wasn't ready to go. So you have to kind of be a little bit careful of that as well. And I would say that if you are on that bubble of like, maybe it will, maybe it won't, straight up ask for clarification. Ask them to put it in writing well before you're going up for PNT and to say, yes, that counts as this. I had a case where there was an invitation for a special issue of a journal. And I thought, man, I have something that would fit really well in that. And I sent the call for proposals to my PNT chair and to my department chair. And I said, will a publication in this area count? And they had said, yes. And so when there was question marks in my PNT process, I pulled out those letters and I was like, look, I asked before I did it. And it was allowable then. So if you are on that cusp, don't hesitate to get things in writing. Don't just get it word of mouth, because word of mouth goes away, right? People forget they said something, they forget the context of it. You can argue that all day long. Get it in writing so that way you can produce it if there is an issue later on down the road, and include that in your documentation to say this was approved as an allowable publication, grant, whatever the case may be.
Yeah, and I'll echo a little bit what they said as far as like really nailing down your PNT language. And maybe to evolve that a little bit is to get a clear understanding of what work output satisfies a scholarly activity. Because in our college, we probably represent both ends of the spectrum on that issue. Down in our school, the schools of Safe Security and Emergency Management, very broad on what can be included, to include doing research and simply presenting it at a national conference or some kind of significant conference. That could be acceptable scholarly output for PNT. Didn't necessarily need to publish it. The reason being is in our world, in occupational safety, fire, there just aren't a lot of journals that we can target. However, upstairs, they're on the other end of the spectrum in criminal justice, and the chair back at the time, this goes back a few years, Vic Kapler, he even said we're in R1 without the title, because they cranked peer-reviewed journal articles out like crazy. Almost so to where when I first came here, I was like totally intimidated. I'm like, that's just insane what they're producing up there. But, I kind of settled into a rhythm and realized, where we were at in our school. And so my research really became, if you look at my Vita, my research agenda looks more like a shotgun than a rifle. Because a lot of people pick a topic, like maybe stuttering. And that become, a variation of that topic becomes everything they publish on, they speak on, they write on, that's it. I've got stuff in college teaching, occupational safety, fire, school safety, so in our world, we're a little broader. But I've actually pursued projects that are just of interest to me, that I think can have an important impact on the field. But again, I have the latitude to do that because of our policy. We're very broad in what we can do. One thing I would definitely recommend is to pursue and be open to partnerships in your scholarship. I am not a stats guy. I made A's in stats in my doctoral program, loved it, because I've always been a math person. I've always seen it as a kind of problem-solving gig. But for me to sit down and map out a study and write all that, I knew I was way out of my league. So I had a study that I wanted to do, and I went across campus, talked to Michelle in the stats department, and said, hey, this is the problem I've got. This is the data I want to collect that needs to be analyzed to answer that problem. Can you help me figure out what needs to be done? And she picked the ball up, did all statistical analysis, wrote that section of the article up, and we got it published. And maybe to kind of jump to the failure part, I also had a big failure in partnerships. Has anybody ever adopted kids before in here? Well, maybe some of you may not know, kids that are in foster care can't do crap. They can't play ball, because the state is paying their insurance and they don't want them hurt. So they exempt them from playing football, but all kinds of stuff. So years ago, adopted a couple of kids that were siblings that needed to stay together. So we were throwing everything at the wall to see what stuck. And when I was in high school, I was a member of a volunteer fire department. And so I thought my son is old enough, and a good friend of mine from back in that day actually rose to become the director of the West Virginia University Fire Service Extension that does all the training for the volunteer fire service in West Virginia. They hold a junior firefighter camp. So I thought I'll take Michael up there, see if this is one of those things that stick. While I was up there, I was small talking with one of the trainers, and I said, it's kind of odd that there's so many girls here, because the fire service is a dude profession. I mean, it's totally weighted toward males to the point of like 92% of membership nationwide. So when I showed up and saw these young ladies out there, I thought, man, this is awesome. And the guy was like, well, you need to see my home department. We're 60% female. And I was like, that doesn't sound right. So I talked to him later, went back to my room, did some research, found out they really were legit and were out in the stratosphere. And of all places, Braxton County, West Virginia, not outside of Chicago, not outside of New York City, Braxton County, West Virginia. So I took that away and I'm like, I want to come back and do a study on them to find out how this even happened. And this gets to the point of failure in partnerships. When I was going through my doctoral program, I had a really good friend that was an African-American student, and he wanted to do a study on a African-American, if I get this right, sorority that was at an HBCU somewhere, that there was some really interesting story. I forget what the background was, but he was telling me all about it. I'm like, dude, that sounds exciting. I said, you need to hop on that. He brings it into our qualitative research class and presents his proposal to the professor, and she's like, that ain't happening. And he was like, why? She said, because you're a guy. Guys don't tell women's stories. So I'm going into the Frametown project with that playing in the back of my head. And I'm like, I'm a dude getting ready to tell this female story. So I'm like, I need to get some women on board to help with this. So I reached out to people in women and gender studies. Because it'd been a while since I've been directly involved in the fire service, I reached out to some folks in our fire program to kind of get some balance there. Nothing, no takers. But I thought, I'm not going to let this lie. So I picked it up and ran with it. What started out as being something that I thought I was going to go up to Frametown interview these people with a digital recorder and come back and transcribe all the interviews and write up a qualitative research article, publish it, move on to my next project. That evolved to thinking, well, I'll take Chris Radcliffe with me, who used to be the EKU photographer, and if the stories are rich enough, it might be cool to get a really cool theme of photography of these people, and maybe I can write a book. Well, then Chris was like, well, did you ever think about video recording the interviews? So I thought, well, that's cool. So then I talked to communications and brand management, and then I've got 2 videographers going up there with me. And so this thing blew up from a journal article to me producing a mini documentary. And I had never done that before. I mean, I didn't know anything about filmmaking. And what was hilarious was we came back, and this is kind of maybe to kind of give you courage to get outside of your comfort zone and what you can actually accomplish that you might not think you can accomplish today. We go up there, do these interviews, come back after the first trip, and I'm sitting in this meeting with my communications and brand management folks and Chris, and we're kind of doing a tear down of the first visit. And I'm like, well, how about this mini documentary? And they're like, well, let us know when you've got the script written. And I was like, and in my head, I'm like screaming. I thought that was your job. And I was just like, okay, cool, I'll get back with you. And so I go home and I'm like, and so I just start tearing through all these videos. I said, and again, systems thinking, I set up a matrix of how I thought this film could flow, went into the videos, pulled out certain quotes that connected with certain topics, wrote the script out, for the narrator to write, to read and all this kind of stuff. It ended up getting nominated for an Emmy.
Wow.
So to Shirley's comment about doing twofers, Braintown's given me a fourfer because shortly after the data collection was done originally, did a quick trade journal article that got published in Firehouse Magazine online. Then I did the journal article. The journal article is a whole other goat rope. Finding journals that are interested in your work can be a challenge. I ended up with probably the most unlikely journal that I thought would want it after I found out what they were really about, but I'd already gone through an hour and a half of submitting stuff until I realized but it was Fire, published out of Switzerland, so it was an international journal. But so I got the trade journal article, the peer review journal article, the mini documentary, and a conference presentation at a national qualitative research conference hosted by UNLV out in Vegas. And now I'm working on the FIFER, which is a book that I'm trying to pound through. And as I was telling Rusty, that's kind of a challenge because I'm used to writing text speak. I can take my safety stuff and fashion it and put it out there. But here I'm having to write history. And I'm having to take a fact and figure out how to make the reader see it, feel it, hear it. So I'm reading a lot of books on history to try to find a voice and everything. So with all that said, I guess I'd really just encourage you to be open for partnerships, but buckle up if they don't work out, and still have the energy to pursue it if it's a project that you're passionate about.
And do let us know if you're nominated for an Emmy.
And invite you to the party.
Somebody told me one time, joking, they were like, dude, if I was you, every time you show up somewhere, I would make them put that in front of your name whenever they introduce you. Forget doctor, get me nominated.
So I wanted to ask a question since we're on research about research and TMP. I'm John King. I'm from, I teach public relations and communications. This is my 32nd year of teaching. I've taught at Research Ones and Research Intensive and overseas and Dubai. I've got about 50 publications. I've managed to do 1.5 in the 2 years I've been here. And I understand for tenure, what counts is what I've produced here, right? What about for promotion? Do you look at the corpus of your work that you've done throughout your career, or is it just what you're producing here at EKU?
It's when the clock starts here, but I would like to say, because this is one of the things I don't think came up, is the qualitative part of your journey. Beth Poland always talks about, you have to sell us on your journey. You have to sell that committee on your journey. So I came in as an experienced researcher who did this, and this is how I've taken it here. So really telling that story, I think, is really important. And everybody talked about kind of numbers, pay attention to what you need for tenure and or promotion. I can tell you, sitting on those committees, I want to hear the story. Because if you're just doing that, I may not be able to vote for you. Yeah, you got your number, but you're not telling me how this has impacted your life as a faculty member here at EKU, your life as a teacher here at EKU, or your service here at EKU. So that's one of the things that I've seen from a failure perspective, because I'm not good at tooting my own horn. But I've learned that's what I have, telling that story is really, really critical. So just don't look at the quantity, those numbers up. You need 3, peer-reviewed publications.
They're all peer reviewed.
Or, whatever. The other one that really comes up in my area, and we've had that same discussion of scholarship of teaching and learning, if it counts or not. And really, where are you publishing it? Do proceedings count? Do your professional, like, in my mind, if we're publishing somewhere outside and bringing notoriety back to EKU, and it says, Shirley O'Brien, faculty member EKU, I may be getting recruitment from that. So it should be looked at that. Well, my department doesn't always agree with me, so I stick it under service. That's one of the things you have to have that discussion with, though, because sometimes the climate does change about that. What do they look at trade magazines as? What are the trade magazines in your discipline? Real important to put out. And then also to think about where you are presenting. Again, I get invited all the time with Fayette County schools, they think I have something to say. And I love to do the kickoff for them. But, again, that's service. Even though I prepared a scholarly presentation, it wasn't peer reviewed. So just make sure you clarify what it is that you're doing. Yeah.
One other thing that I've noticed that's surfacing more and more are article processing charges for journals. Are y'all familiar with those?
Oh, yeah.
I've hit and missed on looking into this through the years. When I first started here at Eastern, I thought, well, if you're not familiar with it, an article processing charge is literally a fee that a journal will charge you for publication if your work is accepted by peer review for publication. When I first heard about that 14 years ago, coming from industry and being really sensitive to financial conflict of interest, I thought that is sketchy as crap. I'm like, because number one, are they just going to start accepting more articles just because they can get that fee? And then on the side of the faculty member, I thought that's kind of exploiting tenure track faculty, because now they're going to have to be paying for this. So I put this out there to kind of tie into what they said too, as far as really looking into your P&T policies, is to figure out if you can bypass any journal that requires one of those and publish your work in those that do not. Ours, we can do that. I mean, we don't do that. What I found interesting in looking at this, and sorry that this is old news to some of y'all, but it's new news to me. I'm part of a federal grant in partnership with UK, and I reached out to them a couple years back and I said, hey, out of curiosity, what's UK's position on this? And they were like, our faculty publish in them all the time. But what they do is they are so grant heavy up there that they build those fees into their grants. So the faculty aren't paying for it out of pocket. So in all this, I've kind of been wondering, I'm like, man, I wonder if any EKU faculty through the years have been quietly paying these fees to get tenure, not realizing that it may not necessarily be necessary to do that. So I just throw that out there as a potential issue, and to check into it in your department to see if non-APC journals are okay to print in. And I've actually been working with folks in the library here because, and another reason this came out is one of our graduate students' capstones we're trying to get published. And that was one of the propellers she walked into. So I've been working with the library to figure out how can we more easily as faculty identify non-APC journals to publish in. So.
And coupled with that, there are some of those APC journals that are predatory. And you can pick them out, you can just see what they do. They pay reviewers or, they have fake reviews. There are, and again, my librarians, you got, I was gonna say, Britt, just tell me is it Beals?
Yes, Beals is the French for journals. Do you know the name? Google it. I think it's Beals. Yeah.
I think it's Beals or it begins with a C, but really checking them out because are they predatory? Or again, like for us, the Journal of Allied Health has gone to APC. I didn't know that when I was working with a colleague and found out then, we were paying $500 each to get published in the Journal of Allied Health, which is really an esteemed publication. And so I was blown away. I'm like, oh dear, there goes Christmas. Luckily there were funds in the college that year that I was able to apply for extra money for faculty development, but I did not even think about that. So make sure you know before if there is a charge to publish in number one, and number two, is it predatory?
I'll say from the librarian, from the librarian perspective, we do have a few subscriptions to certain databases and certain journals that we build in APC charge with. There's a couple on campus, one in chemistry, I think of particularly, that part of that subscription that we pay pays for the APC we don't publish. Now, that's a little rarer right now, but there are other options that are outside of the APC charge. That's truly an open access model, a true open access model.
And always negotiate with your publisher, like you're negotiating anything else. I had a faculty member recently who was going for a publication and her processing fee was $4,000.
Yeah.
However, she applied for a waiver and was like, hi there, I teach at this kind of university. We have no money, and they waived her fee. So
There are options. We can help you get that.
And we thank you, our librarians, very, very much. Okay, you can see we spent a lot of time on teaching and scholarship. We kind of talked about horror stories within there. 1 minute on service each. What kind of goal setting, management, project management do you have on service? Go.
Say yes to everything. No, I'm just kidding. No, the sad thing is, early on, you might have to, because, you're gonna get the committees nobody else wants to be on. So you may get stuck with some lesser favorite activities. But as you kind of progress, as you feel confident and kind of work with your chair, be more discerning. And I would also recommend not just serving, but take leadership roles. Because when I'm on our P&T committee and I see somebody submitting a document and their service is basically, they were on 3 different departmental committees over a 5-year period, that's not very impressive. But if they were on this college committee, this university committee, and maybe they served as a chair on maybe 1 of those or 2 of those, but just kind of ramp yourself up into it, be strategic about it.
Yeah, I'd say pick service opportunities that align with your strengths and your interests. If there's a need in the department and it just happens to align with your interests and strengths, then by all means, that's your position. I do that as curriculum committee chair. I'm like, I like this. I like the nuance. I like the detail. I like doing the paperwork. No one else in my department even reads it. I do it and then they just ignore it. And they say, yeah, approve whatever you put in there. And I'm like, great. So I chair that one year on, year out because no one else wants to, and I would do the work anyway. So finding ways to be strategic with that. And then also when you go to write your narrative, when you go to write up your service, write it as a narrative, like Shirley was talking about. Like, don't just say I was on that committee. Tell me what you did on that committee, because I've been on committees that literally never met the entire year. And if I'm saying, well, I was on those committees, and I'm sitting there going, well, I sat on that committee with you, Charlie, and we didn't even meet that year. So why is that even included? Or you didn't even show up to the meetings. why can I vote that you've done that, you know? So tell me what you did as part of that committee, and if you're calling it leadership, you know, tell me what you did as a leader in that regard. You know, you joined the board of this organization, well, what did you do as part of the board? What did you do as the chair of the committee or in organizing a workshop or things like that? So make sure that you're really clear and specific and get letters from those that you worked with. You know, that say, hey, we invited them to be part of this panel and they accepted and came clear and did a great job, you know, something as simple as that can really go a long way for the evaluators to say, yeah, they not only did it, but they did it well and they made a strong contribution to their service.
That's all great. Yeah, I would just echo what everyone said too about just saying yes to things. And probably the first couple of years or so, there might be more service that you may have to do. Try to seek out chances where you might be able to take a leadership role, like chairing and everything. In my experience, when I've approached service too, you know, there's like the surface level too of what you're doing as a committee. There's, you know, some procedural things you have to do. There's a focus, things you're charged with. Obviously, you're going to do that. But I've always found that going to a deeper level in that service that I don't know about all of you, but I found that I met colleagues across the university in service like that I would have never met before. And it's really developed a lot of great professional relationships that I would have never met before across the university. So there's always something to learn, right? I would just encourage you to be open with all of that. To go quickly here, to one of the last questions is about skills that you picked up throughout your career. One of them is work-life balance. I don't know if I think the guy. It's all right, we're professors, right? We can work-life balance. So that's a big thing too. Make sure to budget time to have fun and also to play, whatever that is for you. Speaking of that, here's the segue. I have to go pick up my daughter from school, and so I have to leave right now. So talking about work-life balance. So thank you so much for having me here. And I gotta go get in the car line, you know, and do the car line pickup thing with my daughter. So yeah, thanks everybody.
And I just want to say that service is crucial. I think we're talking about it in the third topic of the conversation, but it's crucial, not only for collegiality, but also to find where you can be a leader across campus, right? Many times we tend to think of service as the third least important, or I guess third most important in our PMT. But in reality, it's crucial. It helps to increase the numbers in your programs with recruitment, you know, and it's again, you know, reading the room, reading the context of the university and understanding that, you know, service is needed. So I think not only is it opportunities to meet people, but opportunities to grow, right? Finding where you can contribute, be the leader in those areas. And yeah, there's a lot of resources for service. Yeah.
So my question for all of you, how many of you are relators? Yeah. So that's where you get to hone those relationship skills through your service. Just again, stopping by, showing up, really talking about that within your documents every year. How well do you use your relator, Patrick?
Me?
Yeah.
A lot, actually. I mean, at work and with friends and stuff like that. I'm the guy who, if you just leave your door a little bit open, I may still 10 minutes. Yeah, definitely. I'm that kind of person. Yeah.
So we know we want you at a recruitment table.
No, I mean, I would love, yeah, definitely.
That was one of the notes I had taken on my short list of things to make sure to say, but to say in your early career, bother the tenured faculty, you know. I wish I had done more of just like making people open their door to have conversations with me, because the people that I did have conversations with were all pre-tenure. You know, we were all kind of in the same boat, and it ended up being a lot of like blind leading the blind, because none of us knew what conversations were happening in the PMT committee, but until our documents went up and we were told things that we didn't expect. So even if your tenured faculty have their doors closed all the time, find ways to have those conversations with them, be on committees with them, kind of force your way into having conversations. Ask for mentorship from within your department, because that's gonna open information to you that you don't know that you're missing. And so, yeah, that was my last thing.
So we gotta turn this over to you all. We're a little late in that. You can see we like to talk. I think we're faculty. So what kind of questions do you have for us? Where did we not cover what you need as we talk about scholarship, service, and teaching? Or what do you need clarity on? Go.
I'll jump again. Two things. So I'm in the School of Communication, part of ICCA and part of class, as my colleague here. I'm not clear where service within ICCA falls. Is it department? Is it college? It's sort of in the middle ground. And I've done quite a bit of committee work at the ICCA level that I really enjoy. So I don't know where that falls.
I think those are the questions you have to have with your chair, with Ida, and really outlining, what have I done? These are the things I've done, and I'd approach it the other way. These are the things I've done, but now where does this fall? And one of my colleagues this past year, Sarah Brito. Sarah, are you online? Yeah, Sarah, put together.
I am.
A phenomenal. Hi, Sarah. Sarah put together this phenomenal spreadsheet, took our department's promotion and tenure responsibilities, and then she checks them off. She goes, okay, Shirley, I'm doing this now. Well, it was really one of the best ways I saw, and I always did mine on a board, on a dry erase board, but, she transformed me into, put it on a spreadsheet, Shirley, and, we can do that. So Sarah, thank you for developing that. And that may be something you share with the group, just as an example of taking the written document and then putting it into a format. And because she's an associate professor, she came in, she only cared about the full professor rank, but she's got a great plan for the next 5 years of her life. And you can see where she's going to go, at least quantitatively.
Oh, I was gonna say, we have some things that we question, is this department or is this college service? Where does it fall? You have some recruitment and retention things, if it's a college organized thing versus a department organized thing. And the advice that I was given and that I used was to I define it. So in my narrative and service, clearly state, I am counting things that are recruitment and retention for the university or for the college at those appropriate levels, even if they happened at a department event. So, and then just be internally consistent. Don't be like, this one's over here and that one's over there, because I've got to spread everything out. No, just be internally consistent. Say, I'm counting recruitment and retention in this way, or my service obligations towards this program in this way, because it falls in a gray area. If you can't get a clear answer from your chair, I'd say you define it and then be very internally consistent. And if you can do that in the documents for annual evaluation leading up to PNT, then you have a kind of a basis of saying, I've done this for years and I'm continuing to do that, and this is how I'm going to count it.
Good.
Yeah, all I can add is that truly it comes back to the document. So even if you had the conversation with your chair, make sure it's in the document. A couple of years ago, there was a case with a colleague who went up for full professor, and this colleague that does a lot of service that, could sustain our academics in the university, right? Our academic offering in the university, our academic programming, but it's quote unquote service, right? At least in the college expectations, under college expectations. So within our PNT, within the department, some of those activities were counted under scholarship. But when it came up to the college level, now there were some questions regarding the validity of these activities as scholarship. So I think it's just being very, very open and clear and just making sure following that PNT, I guess, to adopt in services.
Other questions?
Yeah,
Yeah.
just to follow up on that, because we have different levels for service, at the departmental level, college and university level, and even outside the university. So do we rank them? Which one is more important than?
You know, the question for those online is, do we rank our department, college, university, and or then community service in any way? And again, I think that's where in your documents you need to look at, what happens at the department level. I think that becomes the department chair discussion you want to have, you know, help guide me. I'm a second year now. I want to really look at this, so I'm doing it the correct way. Where should I be putting my efforts? And it changes from department to department, just like what Scotty talked about, what goes on for scholarship. The same thing goes on in service, and I know across health sciences for me. So it's always interesting when I serve on the college committee, you know, it's like, I want to see your documents, and that's what you have to do, is you look at the documents for the department and then try to evaluate based on those. Good questions. Yes.
There's maybe some info that I'll divulge. So I'm on the faculty senate. Because I said yes my second year to everything. Yeah. Year three is, the key word is no this year. So, one of the things I'm doing on the welfare committee, we're actually looking at PD funds, because we don't get very much. And we're comparing ourselves to other universities. And I know some of y'all have been here a long time, and you've seen, I think, seen those funds depleted over the course of years and years and years. So how do you do conference presentations and those sorts of things when you only have $300 given to you and your salary doesn't match?
Yeah.
That.
I second that question.
Third.
Even though it's not as heavily focused on at Eastern, I would strongly encourage grants. Because the grant that I mentioned to you earlier that I partnered with the UK, I've had that for probably 11 years. And in that grant, I've always been able to build in so many thousands of dollars for travel. So I've not had to ask my chair for a travel dollar in over a decade. So that's one possible window of hope. Beyond that, other funding within the departments that folks could maybe.
Gonna say, and there's also our university, the URC committee, where there is grant funding. We just got something from the graduate school for graduate faculty. So it's really looking for that so that you can make sure that you can do it. But that's also the discussion we have to have at the unit level of, okay, these are the P&T guidelines right now, and there is no money for publishing or for presenting. So then you start looking what's closer. I mean, I strategize that way.
I was just gonna say, I attended a workshop this morning and they talked about a new program that apparently EKU is part of, or we subscribe to. It's called Grant Forward. And it's just like a database of grants. You can, almost like Google, you type it in, you can create an account through using your EKU credentials. But it was super simple to find grants through that Grant Forward, supposedly. And they advocated for the Kentucky Academy of Science grants for travel too. Apparently that's a viable resource.
Kentucky Academy of Science also holds a yearly conference, and this year it's next week. It's at in Frankfurt, so it's low. It's usually, I mean, it's within the state, so it's more local and it's much more reasonably priced than some of your bigger conferences. I would also say see if student presentations are equally acceptable, because if you can strategize, there's often pools of money for students to go to conferences that aren't available for faculty. So if you can say, if I can pool me to go to take 4 students who all have presentations, now it's a 4 and I've in one shot hit all of my presentations in one alignment. Or I've done the thing where I've sent the student without me even going because it was in the student's hometown and they could go and stay at their house and, you know, and give the presentation. And I'm like, I hate sending you alone, but also I can't afford to get to go either. And the last thing I would say about PD funding, beyond just conferences, and I'm saying this because I know you're on faculty senate now, and I'm gonna say it. In the sciences, we've used our PD to help buy supplies, and we're not allowed, like, our department was told we're not allowed to do that anymore. And so I have a research project with a student who in honors thesis, and we're just looking at like plastic bag changes with washing because there's a forensic application for it. I had to go to Walmart and buy plastic bags, and I'm like, I can't put this for reimbursement. It's my research. I need them to do research with my honors students. So I'm like, okay, now I've got to go find funding for my $15 plastic bags. But also it's one of the things where I'm like, oh, I had $300 that I was planning to spend 15 of it on plastic bags and move on with my life. But so it just a point that has changed too.
And a note on grant forward really quick, you can also set up alerts linking to your interest area, which Sarah mentioned in the chat. So consider that as well. It could be easier to track.
Yep, and Tiffany Hamblin, I don't know if she was the one who did it, but Tiffany Hamblin, if you want to write that name down, Hamblin. She's a great contact on developing grants. She's a rock star. I mean, I tell.
Pause there. You don't have to write it down. Just come back for our November 15th session. Because it is led by Tiffany Hamblin.
All right.
Awesome. I tell you, I've told a lot of people this. I worked in industry for Nike, AutoZone, IDM, Cargill, the state of Maryland. I've been here for 16 years, and there are a few people that I've crossed paths with that do their job as well as Tiffany does hers. I mean, she has been a godsend on this whole thing with UK. I mean, she really is great. The other thing I'll throw out there is on professional development and scholarship. Pedagogicon is something that I don't know if it's been promoted among y'all. That's another great opportunity. That's
National conference.
What's that?
It's a national.
Yeah, national conference here in our backyard. Works as professional development if you want to attend. Opportunity to present scholarship if you want to be a speaker.
Peer reviewed.
Yes, yeah. And I think there are
There's an opportunity to be a
waivers.
peer reviewer.
Yeah.
Well,
Yes.
And aren't there like waivers or something for EKU faculty?
This year it's free.
Well, there you go.
So
And virtual.
So,
It's
yeah,
virtual.
it's virtual this year. I didn't read that.
Touchy
email.
subject.
Okay.
CPE is.
Well, and that was what I was gonna say too, is virtual conferences. I'm a part of I've presented my autism research at the Ohio Low Incidence, whatever, conference. It used to be in Columbus, and it was just wonderful. Then COVID killed it. And they decided to stay online because of the cost of the conference in the Columbus Convention Center was just too astronomical. So this year they're back to charging for people, but presenters, if you get something accepted, and thank God I did. I got my $250 fee waived. So again, looking for that and doing it with the students. So my two for there is, I'm mentoring to students. So we are right at time, y'all. This panel could probably
Take
talk
it
for
away.
days. You're gonna take this away from me?
Taking that away from.
All right, I'm gonna give it back to you then.
Join me in thanking this panel. You've heard from them, you see their names up here, you may have already known who they were, but they are also, they're EKU stars. And they believe in the mission of the place, and they want to